today is the very first public unveiling in a public presentation of Project Looking Glass. A human being is about this tall. This is built in underground bases. It is colossal in size. And what happens is when you fire this thing up, these rings start going in all different directions. It shields off the barrel of water inside, which is just like your pineal gland. The water inside flips over into time-space, which then captures argon gas, captures visual images, and this is what it looks like. It becomes huge, glowing, all the way out to these posts, which are used as stabilizers for the energy field. Now, it doesn't start out with an image of the Earth. That's just there as a placeholder, although you could see the whole Earth like that if you wanted to. That's not usually what happens. Well, contact, right? We have been given the technology right in front of our faces in the movies. They just don't tell you what it's for. In what? 13 Ghosts? Well, thank you. I'll have to check that one out. Doesn't sound like a movie I'd want to see, but if it's for that... Oh, I can imagine. So, Contact, just to recap from yesterday, blueprints come in from the Vegans, from Vega. They figure out that it's only when you fold up these patterns into a cube, which forms what there in the center, the triangle with the eye in the middle, as it folds up, cube geometry, that's when you can decode the plans to build this, these rings, which becomes this machine. And there's your little helicopter. So there's another shot of it. They got computer animations of how it's going to work with the different rings moving. This actually looks like the fisheye lens distortion effect that happens around the looking glass when you power it on. There's a gantry crane up at the top, and the little guy is dropped down and goes inside. That's like your barrel inside the mechanism there. And this is where all the action happens. This is where the Stargate opens, the wormhole into the higher realms. In this frame, we're seeing how the whole thing collapsed and fell apart. So, of course, you want to take a ride. You know, the new the new formation of the one after the old one breaks. And here we're seeing the new one. Once again, you get a very clear view, and there's your little eye with the rays coming off it, just like the all-seeing eye on the dollar. Not surprising. Here she is. It's even larger than the real one, standing on this ladder, looking down inside. This is the chamber and the chair inside, which we'll see is very important. And here's your geometry. Look at that. Did anybody notice that when you were watching the movie? Because it goes by pretty fast. That's that same geometry that's in the background radiation of the whole universe with the sphere in the center. They fire it up. Guess what happens? Big, bright luminosity, just like the real thing. The real thing that they're actually using and have been using since the 40s at least. And here's what it looked like from the control room. It gets brighter and brighter, and then she starts having the floor disappear. She gets dropped down inside, and then, of course, she goes through this wild wormhole ride, and there's an ascension experience at the end of the dream. The Iraq War had, to a large degree, the mission of capturing a looking glass technology that was dug up in Sumer, which was originally in the possession of Gaddafi in Libya, which is why they attacked Libya. Gaddafi got rid of it and gave it to Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was using this technology, viewing the future. The U.S. government went in after him because they felt that the fate of the world was at stake, because if they did not capture this technology and get it back and deconstruct it, that the Earth would have a pole shift. But when you actually decipher these letters, it means the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox. Here's the problem. You look through time with this device, and when you hit 2012, everything goes perfectly white. As you get closer and closer to 2012, starting in around 1980, a very strange thing has been happening when they use the looking glass. There is an interlacing of images. So right now, imagine that if I had this slide on half the time, and then the other half of the time there was an image of like a face. And if I interlace them slowly, then maybe every second it goes from here to the face to here to the face. Then as it speeds up, it gets faster and faster to the point that if it were complex images, you couldn't make out one from the other because they're flip-flopping so fast. Okay? That's called interlacing, and the frequency of the interlacing gets higher and higher as you go towards 2012. So anytime that they try to look at, like, or they used to try to look, because they're not using them anymore, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, bam. It's so interlaced that they have a whole server farm of computers just to deconstruct the two images and be able to see what they're looking at in the future. So again, this is what they're using. This is one of the main ones they're using, the Orion Cube as they call it, or the Cube. And also it's being used with Looking Glass. But what's going on with 2012? Well, here's another very interesting thing. We have multiple parallel futures that we can choose. And 2012 literally does represent create your own reality time. It has everything to do with what do you expect is going to happen. This is where thoughts becoming reality really takes on a whole new meaning in a way that you've never heard of before. So what they found that was so bizarre was that at December 21st, 2012, they could calculate it down to the day, that's how precise this was, that for some reason all the graphs, all the waves would go into a complete flat line. They no longer moved up and down like before. They went flat for like 7 or 8 seconds. So then they're asking the guys that went through these stargates and were traveling into the future, what happened to you? Every single time that somebody tried to hit 2012, they said the same thing. There was this thing they called the bump. It actually hits you like a bump. You actually feel like you've slammed into something. And as soon as it slams into you, you have the most incredible religious experience you can imagine. Cosmic consciousness. Your consciousness just blasts into this wonderful place where you have awareness of no space, no time. All knowledge is available to you. Ecstatic God consciousness. You could be the galaxy, you could be a subatomic particle, you can go everywhere, do everything, and there's no sense of it ever ending. So when it finally stops, you just can't even believe that you're back to who you were before.
Like what happened to Jodie Foster?
Exactly what happens to Jodie Foster in Contact. So,
Is that the moment of no time then?
That's the zero time, yeah. And Daniel doesn't agree with me on this, but I believe that 2012 is our zero time reference. And when you hit 2012, everything goes perfectly white.